There comes a moment in life that nobody prepares you for. It doesn't arrive with loud music. There's no dramatic speech, no cinematic explosion, no applause. It usually happens quietly, maybe late at night when everyone else is asleep. Maybe during a long drive with your thoughts getting louder than the radio. Maybe after another conversation where you smiled on the outside, while something inside you slowly collapsed. And in that moment, you realize something painful. You've spent most of your life trying to be accepted by people who were never fully at peace with themselves. You adjusted your personality so others would feel comfortable. You stayed quiet to avoid conflict. You said yes when your soul wanted to scream no. You laughed at jokes that hurt you. You tolerated disrespect because losing people felt scarier than losing yourself. And little by little, you disappeared. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just slowly. Like fog swallowing a city. The dangerous thing about seeking approval is that it feels harmless in the beginning. It even feels rewarding. People compliment you for being easygoing, for being agreeable, for being selfless, for being good. But deep down, there's a cost nobody talks about. Every time you betray yourself for acceptance, your confidence weakens. Every time you silence your truth to avoid rejection, your identity fractures. Every time you shape yourself into what others want, you move further away from who you were meant to become. And eventually, you wake up exhausted. Not because life is hard, but because pretending is. There are people walking through life right now wearing versions of themselves they created just to survive socially. Different personalities for different rooms. Different opinions depending on who's watching. Different masks for every environment. And after years of performing, they no longer know which version is real. That's what approval addiction does. It disconnects you from your own voice. You stop asking yourself what you truly want. Instead, you ask what will make others stay. But here's the truth most people avoid because it terrifies them. No matter how perfect you become, someone will still misunderstand you. Someone will still judge you. Someone will still dislike you. You could sacrifice your happiness for years trying to please everyone and still end up criticized by people who never had the courage to become themselves. So at some point, you have to choose. Will your life belong to your truth? Or to other people's opinions? Because both paths demand a price. If you choose approval, you lose yourself. If you choose authenticity, you risk rejection. But one of those pains leads to freedom, and the other leads to regret. The strongest people you will ever meet are not the people everyone applauds. They are the people who finally became comfortable disappointing others in order to stop disappointing themselves. That kind of strength changes everything. Because once you stop chasing validation, your energy returns. Your mind becomes quieter. Your decisions become clearer. Your confidence becomes real. Not performative confidence. Not loud confidence. Not social media confidence. Real confidence. The kind that exists even when nobody claps for you. And that kind of confidence is rare because it's built in silence. It's built the moment you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. It's built the moment you stop shrinking to fit places you've outgrown. It's built the moment you realize peace matters more than approval. But getting there isn't easy. Because humans are wired for belonging. From childhood, we learn that acceptance equals safety. A child who feels rejected often learns to shape-shift emotionally, just to maintain connection. So we grow older carrying invisible fears. fear of being judged, fear of abandonment, fear of disappointing people, fear of not being liked. And those fears quietly control entire lives. Some people stay in relationships that destroy them because they fear being alone. Some never pursue their dreams because they fear criticism. Some never speak honestly because they fear conflict. Some never evolve because they fear losing familiar people. Imagine how many lives remain small not because of lack of talent, but because of fear of disapproval. Think about that. Potential buried beneath politeness. Greatness hidden beneath people-pleasing. Purpose suffocated by the need to fit in. The tragedy is not failure. The tragedy is becoming a stranger to yourself. Because eventually, your soul notices. You can ignore your instincts for years. You can silence your intuition. You can betray your values repeatedly. But your inner world keeps score. That's why so many people feel empty despite external success. They built a life that gained approval but lost alignment. And misalignment drains the spirit. You can feel it when you wake up uninspired every day. You can feel it when conversations feel performative. You can feel it when your smile no longer feels connected to your heart. Your body often knows before your mind admits it. Exhaustion, anxiety, restlessness, emotional numbness. Sometimes these are not signs you need more motivation. Sometimes they are signs you need more honesty. Honesty about who you are. Honesty about what you want. Honesty about what no longer fits your life. Because healing begins the moment pretending ends. There is incredible power in saying, "This isn't me anymore." Not arrogantly. Not aggressively. Just truthfully. Growth requires separation. And one of the hardest realities of personal transformation is this. Not everyone will understand the version of you that emerges when you stop abandoning yourself. Some people benefited from your lack of boundaries. Some people felt comfortable when you doubted yourself. Some people preferred the quieter version of you because it required less from them. So when you finally begin changing, resistance appears. You'll be called selfish for protecting your peace. You'll be called different for setting standards. You'll be called cold for no longer tolerating disrespect. But what people call selfish is often self-respect they're unfamiliar with. Remember that. You are not required to destroy your mental health just to maintain someone else's comfort. You are not obligated to stay emotionally small so others don't feel insecure. You are allowed to evolve. And evolution often feels lonely before it feels liberating. There will be nights where you question yourself. Moments where guilt creeps in. Times where old habits pull at you. Because transformation is not linear. You don't suddenly wake up fearless. You slowly become tired of betraying yourself. That's the difference. One day you simply realize the exhaustion of pretending has become heavier than the fear of authenticity. And that realization changes your life. Because now your decisions shift. You stop saying yes automatically. You stop chasing conversations that drain you. You stop over-explaining your boundaries. You stop apologizing for your growth. And strangely, the more authentic you become, the calmer your life becomes. Not easier. Calmer. There's a difference. Your problems don't disappear. Criticism doesn't disappear. Uncertainty doesn't disappear. But internal conflict begins disappearing. And internal peace is priceless. There is something deeply powerful about looking in the mirror and recognizing yourself again. Not the edited version. Not the socially acceptable version. The real version. The honest version. The version that no longer needs constant reassurance to feel worthy. Because true self-worth is not built through external applause. It's built through internal integrity. Through keeping promises to yourself. Through honoring your instincts. Through refusing to abandon yourself even when it would be socially convenient. That's why discipline matters beyond success. Discipline is self-trust in action. Every time you follow through on something meaningful despite discomfort, you reinforce a message internally. I can rely on myself. And people who trust themselves move differently through life. They don't panic every time someone disagrees with them. They don't crumble under rejection. They don't need constant validation to make decisions. Because they're rooted internally. That's real power. The world often teaches people to seek status instead of substance. To appear confident instead of becoming grounded. To impress instead of align. But external admiration without internal peace eventually feels empty. There are people with millions of followers who feel deeply alone. People with successful careers who secretly hate their lives. People constantly surrounded by others, yet disconnected from themselves. Because external attention cannot replace internal connection. At some point, you must sit alone with yourself and answer difficult questions. What do you actually believe? What genuinely matters to you? What kind of life feels true to your spirit? Who are you when nobody's watching? Those questions are uncomfortable because they force honesty. And honesty changes everything. Once you become honest with yourself, your tolerance changes. You stop entertaining fake connections. You stop settling for environments that poison your energy. You stop negotiating with your own values. And slowly, your life becomes more intentional. Not perfect. Intentional. There's wisdom in understanding that not every relationship is meant to survive your growth. Some people only know how to connect with the version of you that lacked boundaries. Some only feel comfortable around your insecurity. Some disappear the moment you stop needing their approval. Let them go. Not with hatred. Not with bitterness. Just with understanding. Everyone cannot accompany you into every season of your life. Some people are chapters. Some are lessons. Some are mirrors revealing what you must heal. And sometimes losing certain connections is exactly what allows you to reconnect with yourself. That's why solitude becomes important. Not isolation. Not avoidance. Solitude. There's a difference. Solitude is where clarity grows. When you spend time alone without distraction, you begin hearing your own thoughts again. Your own desires. Your own intuition. And for many people, that's terrifying. Because silence exposes truth. You begin realizing how much of your life was driven by fear instead of purpose. How many decisions were based on approval instead of alignment. How much energy went into maintaining images instead of building peace. But awareness is the beginning of freedom. You cannot change what you refuse to see. That's why self-awareness is one of the most powerful forms of transformation. Most people spend years trying to control external circumstances while never understanding their internal patterns. Patterns like over-explaining yourself, seeking reassurance constantly, avoiding conflict at all costs, feeling responsible for everyone's emotions, equating rejection with worthlessness. These patterns often begin early, but they do not have to define your future. Healing means recognizing old survival strategies that no longer serve your growth. Maybe pleasing everyone protected you once. Maybe staying quiet kept you emotionally safe before. Maybe shrinking yourself prevented criticism. But survival habits eventually become prisons if never examined. Growth requires new behaviors. And new behaviors feel uncomfortable because they challenge identity. For example, the first time you set a boundary, guilt appears. The first time you speak honestly, fear appears. The first time you choose yourself, anxiety appears. Not because you're wrong, because you're unfamiliar. And unfamiliarity often feels dangerous to the nervous system. That's why real growth requires patience. You are not just changing habits. You are rewiring emotional conditioning built over years. So be patient with yourself. Confidence is not built overnight. Neither is self-respect. Neither is emotional freedom. But every honest decision strengthens them. Every time you choose alignment over approval, you reclaim a piece of yourself. And eventually, those small moments create an entirely different life. A life where your mood no longer depends on strangers' opinions. A life where your worth isn't determined by attention. A life where peace becomes more valuable than performance. That kind of life feels lighter. Not because life becomes easy, but because authenticity removes unnecessary emotional weight. Think about how exhausting it is trying to maintain versions of yourself that aren't real. Trying to sound perfect. Trying to look perfect. Trying to avoid judgment constantly. It drains the soul. Freedom begins when you realize you were never designed to be universally accepted. No human being is. Even the greatest minds in history faced criticism. Even the kindest people were misunderstood. Even the strongest leaders faced rejection. So why spend your life chasing something impossible? Why sacrifice authenticity for temporary approval from people still searching for themselves? At some point, maturity means understanding this. People's opinions often reveal more about their inner world than your worth. A person filled with insecurity will criticize confidence. A person afraid of growth will mock ambition. A person uncomfortable with themselves may project negativity onto others. Not everything people say about you is truth. Sometimes it's reflection. And once you understand that, criticism loses some of its power. You stop internalizing every judgment. You stop collapsing every time someone misunderstands you. You stop needing universal agreement to feel secure. That emotional independence changes your entire reality. Because now your energy can focus on building instead of proving. Building discipline. Building peace. Building purpose. Building health. Building meaningful relationships. Building self-respect. And those things create a life far more fulfilling than endless validation ever could. There's a quiet confidence that develops when your life becomes rooted in values instead of image. You walk differently. You speak differently. You think differently. Not arrogantly. Calmly. Because inner stability creates outer calm. People can feel that energy. The energy of someone no longer desperate for approval. And ironically, that's often when genuine respect begins appearing. Because authenticity is magnetic. Not everyone will like it, but the right people will trust it. Real connection only happens when people meet the real you. Masks may attract attention, but authenticity builds meaningful relationships. And meaningful relationships require vulnerability. The courage to be seen honestly. That includes admitting fears, admitting imperfections, admitting uncertainty. Perfection is not what makes people inspiring. Truth is, people are drawn toward authenticity because everyone is secretly exhausted from pretending. The strongest individuals are not those without flaws. They are those no longer hiding from themselves. Imagine the freedom in no longer performing constantly, no longer calculating every word to avoid judgment, no longer changing personalities for acceptance, no longer sacrificing your values for belonging. That freedom is life-changing, because now your energy belongs to creation instead of performance. You can focus on your goals without obsessing over opinions. You can pursue growth without explaining every step. You can evolve without needing permission. That's adulthood in its highest form, taking responsibility for your own peace. And peace requires boundaries, a word many people misunderstand. Boundaries are not walls to punish others. They are standards that protect your well-being. They teach people how to treat you. Without boundaries, resentment grows. Without boundaries, exhaustion grows. Without boundaries, identity disappears. Yet many people fear boundaries because they fear rejection. But relationships built only through self-abandonment are not healthy connections. They are emotional transactions. True connection survives honesty. And if someone leaves because you finally respected yourself, their presence was conditional from the beginning. That realization hurts. But it also liberates. Because now you stop chasing people who only valued your compliance. You begin valuing mutual respect instead. And mutual respect changes relationships completely. It allows honesty without fear, individuality without punishment, growth without guilt. That's the kind of connection every human deserves. But it starts with your relationship with yourself. Because the way you treat yourself teaches others what you tolerate. If you constantly disrespect your own needs, others eventually will too. If you constantly minimize your feelings, others may dismiss them as well. If you constantly abandon yourself, your confidence weakens. Self-respect is foundational. Not ego. Not superiority. Self-respect. The quiet decision to stop betraying yourself. And once that decision becomes consistent, life changes gradually. You become more selective with energy, more intentional with time, more protective of peace. Not because you think you're better than others, because you finally understand your value. Value is not loud. Real value doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't chase validation desperately. It doesn't need constant applause. Real value is grounded. And grounded people don't panic when misunderstood, because they know who they are. That level of self-awareness takes work. Years sometimes. Moments of reflection. Painful honesty. Emotional healing. Difficult decisions. But the reward is priceless. Inner freedom. The ability to exist authentically without constant fear of judgment. And once you experience that freedom, you realize how much energy approval-seeking consumed. So much mental noise. So much anxiety. So much overthinking. All because of one deep fear. What if people don't accept me? But ask yourself something important. If acceptance requires you to abandon your truth, is it really acceptance? Or is it performance? Real acceptance includes authenticity. The right people do not require you to become smaller to remain loved. The right environments do not punish your growth. The right relationships do not demand self-betrayal. And the more you believe that, the less desperate you become for temporary validation. Desperation disappears when self-worth grows. You stop needing everyone to agree with your path. You stop needing immediate external approval. You stop seeking identity through attention. Instead, you begin building internally, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and internal growth creates external transformation naturally. Your standards rise. Your habits improve. Your confidence stabilizes. Your decisions sharpen. Because your life is no longer being controlled by fear of perception. That's what makes authenticity powerful. It redirects energy from pleasing others toward becoming yourself. And becoming yourself is a lifelong process. There will always be layers to discover, fears to confront, patterns to unlearn. But every step toward authenticity strengthens your spirit. You become more resilient because you no longer depend entirely on external approval for emotional stability. That resilience matters deeply in today's world. A world filled with comparison, performance, validation addiction, constant visibility. People are losing connection with themselves while trying to maintain digital identities. Always posting, always proving, always comparing. But comparison destroys peace because it distracts you from your own path. No two lives unfold the same way. Different timing, different struggles, different lessons, different purpose. Yet people torture themselves trying to keep up with carefully edited versions of strangers online. And in doing so, they abandon gratitude for their own journey. Comparison creates insecurity because it trains your mind to focus on what's missing instead of what's meaningful. That's why inner work matters. Because external noise will always exist. There will always be opinions, always be trends, always be pressure. But grounded people remain centered despite external chaos. Not perfectly, but intentionally. They return to themselves. That's the goal. Not perfection, self-connection, the ability to hear your own voice clearly despite the world's noise. And your voice matters. Your instincts matter. Your dreams matter. Your boundaries matter. Your peace matters. Never forget that. There is no reward at the end of life for being universally liked. But there is deep regret for never truly living as yourself. Many people reach adulthood carrying dreams they never pursued because they feared judgment. Businesses never started. Books never written. Conversations never spoken. Boundaries never established. Lives never fully lived. All because approval felt safer than authenticity. But safety without fulfillment eventually becomes emotional suffocation. You can feel physically alive while spiritually disconnected. And that disconnection slowly drains joy from existence. That's why courage matters. Not loud courage. Quiet courage. The courage to disappoint people respectfully. The courage to say no. The courage to change. The courage to be misunderstood temporarily while building a life that feels true. Most transformations begin privately, long before results appear externally. There are seasons where nobody understands your growth. Nobody sees your healing. Nobody notices your internal battles. But keep going anyway. Not every meaningful journey receives immediate applause. Sometimes the greatest progress is invisible. The decision to stop abandoning yourself. The decision to stop tolerating disrespect. The decision to stop living performatively. Those choices may look small externally, but internally they change everything. Because identity shapes destiny, and the version of you constantly seeking approval cannot fully access your highest potential. Why? Because fear controls too many decisions. Fear of criticism, fear of rejection, fear of standing out. But greatness often requires standing apart. Not arrogantly, authentically. Every meaningful creator, leader, artist, innovator, and visionary eventually accepted a difficult truth. Being fully yourself will cost you certain forms of acceptance, but it will also attract the right opportunities, people, and purpose aligned with your truth. That trade is worth it, because a peaceful, authentic life is more fulfilling than a performative, admired one. At the end of the day, you must live with yourself. Your thoughts, your choices, your conscience, and inner peace cannot be purchased through public approval. It comes from alignment. Alignment between who you are internally and how you live externally. That alignment creates emotional stability. No more pretending constantly. No more shape-shifting endlessly. No more emotional exhaustion from performance. Just honesty. And honesty heals. Not instantly, but gradually. One truthful decision at a time. One boundary at a time. One courageous conversation at a time. One act of self-respect at a time. Until eventually, you become someone your younger self would finally recognize. Someone grounded. Someone honest. Someone free. Freedom is not the absence of difficulty. It's the absence of self-betrayal. Remember that. Because life will always contain uncertainty. Always contain challenges. Always contain criticism. But suffering multiplies when you abandon yourself trying to avoid discomfort. True peace comes from standing beside yourself, even during difficult moments. Trusting yourself. Protecting yourself. Honoring yourself. That relationship changes every other area of life. Your career choices improve because they align with purpose instead of image. Your relationships improve because they're built on honesty instead of performance. Your mental health improves because internal conflict decreases. Everything shifts. And perhaps the most beautiful part is this. When you stop chasing approval, you unintentionally give others permission to do the same. Your authenticity becomes contagious. People feel safer around realness, safer around honesty, safer around emotional freedom. You inspire others not through perfection, but through courage. The courage to live truthfully. And truthfully living may be one of the rarest things in the modern world. Because society rewards appearances heavily. But appearances cannot sustain the soul. Only alignment can. So if you feel exhausted lately, ask yourself honestly, are you tired from life? Or tired from pretending? That question alone can transform your future. Because once you identify the source of exhaustion, healing becomes possible. And healing often starts with permission. Permission to outgrow old identities. Permission to stop people-pleasing. Permission to prioritize peace. Permission to become someone new. You are allowed to evolve, even if others misunderstand it. Even if it disappoints certain people. Even if it changes relationships. Growth is not betrayal. Self-respect is not selfishness. Authenticity is not arrogance. These are necessary parts of becoming emotionally whole. So stop waiting for universal approval before living honestly. It will never come. Someone will always disagree. Someone will always criticize. Someone will always misunderstand. Let them. Your purpose is not to manage everyone's perception of you. Your purpose is to live in alignment with truth. To become someone you respect deeply when nobody's watching. Because in the quietest moments of life, that relationship matters most. The relationship you have with yourself. Protect it. Nurture it. Strengthen it. Because once you finally stop chasing approval, your real life begins.